Hello learners, welcome to today's episode of the long distance trade. Before you is Nangoma Driscilla from Trinity College Nabingo. Today I want us to look at the organization of long distance trade. Earlier we defined the trade as the trade that took place between the interior tribes and the coastal tribes. And in this trade, we're going to look at the organization politically, socially, and economically. So during this trade, it was organized in caravans where groups of men would be grouped in groups of 100 to 1,000 men who moved long distances from the interior, carrying the commodities on their heads. As they were moving, they were guided by the Sultan's flags, and some of them were even armed for security purposes. By the Sultan, I mean the Sultan of Zanzibar, that is Sultan Saidi Said. These caravans included people like the medicine men, they would be containing cooks, porters, those that are carrying the goods on their heads, the guards to offer security, and as well as the slaves that were carrying the commodities on their heads. So the system of carrying the commodities on their heads is what we are calling head porterage. Now during this trade, the goods that were basically got from the interior that we are going to call as our exports included goods like the slaves, the ivory, the hides and skins, honey, ostrich feathers, gold, and copper. Now, of all these commodities, these are the commodities that Africans were exchanging with the coastal people. The ivory was basically got through hunting down elephants, while the slaves were got by carrying out constant raids. And the prominent group that was known for the raids were the Nyamwezi. African societies had a tendency of giving off the unfortunate members of the society, like the lame, the impotent men, the barren women, were given off as slaves. So it is these slaves that were used to carry the commodities. While gold, on the other hand, was got from Monomotapa Kingdom, that was in Zimbabwe, and this gold was carried by the Makaranga soldiers through the southern route that was controlled by the Yawo to Kilwa for export. Then these slaves, I've said earlier that they were got through raids. Gold was got from Monomotapa Kingdom, while the imports, so those were the exports. Then the imports, these are goods that were brought in by the coastal people. These coastal people include, they say, the Arabs, the Swahili, the Indians that penetrated the interior, bring in goods like guns, gunpowder, beads, swords, mugs, glassware, rugs, mirrors, clothes, to mention but a few. Now, upon entering the interior, they would exchange these goods with the Africans. These goods were exchanged basically through the barter trade system. So, this one I look at the participants of the trade. The participants, I look at the interior tribes because you're looking at Arabs coming from the coast, penetrating into the interior. Now, when they entered the interior, which people did they find? These people that were eager to trade. These were the Nyamwezi, the Akamba, the Yawo, the Baganda, the Banyoro, the Makaranga people that were interested in trading with the Arabs, the Swahili, the Zanzibaris from Zanzibar, the Khartoumas from Sudan, the Indians, the Europeans. They're the ones that had penetrated the interior. So upon coming into the interior, they have gathered the goods. They would exchange the goods using barter trade. Barter trade was the trade for goods for goods. They would exchange goods. For example, I would give you copper, then you give me a gun. That was barter trade. But then later, because barter trade had some weaknesses, for example, there was a lot of cheating. You would not exchange gold for a mirror. So they realized that it was a cheating system. That's when they introduced cowrie shells, whereby the more cowrie shells you had, the more wealthy you were considered. It was like their kind of money. So I went ahead and looked at the ivory. When you look at some of the items we are looking at, we have the ivory. We say this was got by hunting down elephants. So what you're seeing here are the elephant horns, you could call them for your understanding. Then you have a picture of the cowrie shells that were used as a mode of exchange. And then we see slaves carrying commodities. They are being chained, and there is an Arab trader following them who has a gun. So this is how they moved from the interior to the coast. It would take them 6 months before they would reach the coast. Now, someone would be wondering, how would they communicate? Because these are foreigners entering the interior of East Africa. They don't know the local languages. So during this trade, the means of communication, the commercial language was Kiswahili. Most of this Swahili that came from the coast penetrated the interior and taught these interior tribes Kiswahili. For those that didn't know the Kiswahili language, interpreters came handy. Interpreters were the ones helping those Africans that did not understand the Swahili language. During this trade as well, the financiers, the people that offered loans to the Arabs, were the Indian Banyans. I talked about them earlier. These were traders that came to the coast to trade. So they would offer loans to the Arabs. So Arabs would come in and pick the goods from the different trading centers in the interior, because the goods would be got by the Nyamwezi, the Baganda, the Banyoro, and then they would be gathered at the different trading centers. The ones in the interior, we had the Ojiji. This was basically known for its prominence in slaves. We had a center called Tabora. And then we had at the coast, we had Bagamoyo, there was Kilwa, Pangani, Mombasa. So this is where the different coastal traders would pick the commodities. Then after picking the commodities, they would organize different groups. These are the ones we call the caravans. These groups would be the able-bodied men that were gathered from the slave raids, the prisoners of wars, and then they would be tasked to carry the commodities on their heads, then set off for the journeys. But since the journeys were very tiring, Africans, the Europeans, the Arabs embarked on the use of donkeys to improve the transport. Then the local leaders in this trade are the ones that provided security to the traders. They would offer their army men as they move, as the traders are moving, as the Africans are moving with the commodities, those are the slaves. African leaders always offered the security. Then still during this trade, we had trade routes. Those are the pathways, the passages through which they moved. So African tribes took advantage of these Arab rulers, these Arab traders, and they would tax them. So these traders constantly kept paying taxes to the local rulers in the interior. For example, the Nyamwezi controlled the central route, and they would tax the moving traders. So these routes, like I said, were basically four. We had the northern route, the southern route, the central route, and the Karatumas route. How were these routes? The southern one, for example, moved from Kilwa through southern Tanzania, through Malawi, up to Manamotapa Kingdom, where they would get the gold from. And this route was basically controlled by the Yao. Then the other route is the northern route. This one ran from Mombasa through Kilimanjaro, through Lake Turkana, and then to the slopes of Mount Elgon. This was basically found in Kenya up to Uganda. And this was controlled by the Akamba, who would supply slaves, they would supply the copper. Then the central route was the busiest route. This was controlled by the Nyamwezi. It ran from Bagamoyo through Tabora, through Buganda, through Bunyoro and Ujiji. It was the busiest road. Then the Nile Valley route, which is calling the Karatumas route. This is where The Sudanese, it moved from Egypt through Sudan and then up to northern Uganda. So they would come deliver their goods to Buganda, then the Baganda would deliver through Kalagwe to Ojiji, and then finally to Tabora up to Bagamoyo. So that was, I have a map that shows these different routes. The central route, I'm saying, ran from Bagamoyo, we are seeing where Bagamoyo is, through Tabora, through Ujiji. So at Tabora, it's split into three. We have one that moved northwards up to Buganda Kingdom. Then there is one that moved southwards up to Kazembe. Then there is one that moved up to Ujiji. This was controlled basically at Ujiji. Then they would meet with a prominent Tipu up to Central, up to Zaire. Okay. Then we have, sorry about that. The major business was conducted. We looked at how business was conducted, the routes, and how the trade was basically organized. So for any information, any questions, please follow the link below. That is www.tricona.sc.ug@eLibrary. So you can confirm and conclude that the trade was organized politically, socially, and economically. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good day.